So I'm back, and I know it's been a while. And I know I usually say that after every one of these little hiatuses, but this one's technically not my fault. You see, right there, where my car's sitting now, is where the lift is in this garage. Nice, dead centre, and easy to access. Problem is, there's been a Mark II Jaguar on it for about the past year. It's been a long-running restoration for a family friend, and we were hoping to get rid of it a few months ago. But things just kept delaying it, a lot of it to do with coronavirus, and it's still here. However, it is very nearly done, and it's done to the point where it can go up on some chassis skates and get pushed right over to the other wall, giving me space to get my car in. That drive will be going in a few weeks, but for now, we've got enough room to work. And what are we working on, you might ask? Well, it's step 2 of the step 4, 3. It's step 3 of the step 4. It's step 3. That's all we need to worry about. It's a 4-stage process. This is step 3. Step 1, Honda swap. Step 2, turbo the Honda swap. Step 3, get the power to the ground. Now, first thing you will have noticed when you loaded this up was this guy. That is one of my rear wheels. The standard wheels on these cars are, depending on the model, 7 to 7.5 inches wide, I think. Unless I'm wrong, in which case they're not. They're somewhere around that. This guy is 10.5 inches wide, so we're a smidgen bigger. We're going from 225 section rear tyres to 295, so I really shouldn't have any problems putting the power down. This kind of divides owners a little. Some of them with the 400 to 500 horsepower Honda or Audi engine releases like to go for the wider tyres, and quite a lot of them say that there's no real sense with the thinner tyres because they are just too easy to spin up. On the other hand, there's a few owners who do have the 225 section tyres and 500 odd horsepower who say that they're perfectly adequate. And I don't really know who's right. I'm not qualified to comment on that, but I do notice that the folk that stick with the thinner tyres usually have some quite fancy track tyres on all the time, whereas the guys with the wider stuff often run a bit more road biased. There's also a bunch of folk racing these down in Australia with like massive slicks, 500 horsepower, like 600 kilos of downforce. That's Bathurst 24-hour kind of classes. If you can look them up, go do it. They look amazing. But I want to go wider, and that's what I'm doing. And the thing about going wider on the tyres means we have to go wider on the bodywork. And if you're going wider on the bodywork, we might as well solve some of my other issues, most of which is the Elise bodywork. I really wanted to keep it, and I do really like my Elise bodywork. But when you saw me doing the full turbo kit, I'm pretty sure I spent half the time complaining about the lack of space in that engine bay. So while I'm there, I might as well go motorsport body as well. So we're going motorsport body and wider. I've managed to pick up an already widened front clam off a Lotus Club member for really not very much. It was a kind of emergency clam he made just as he was selling his mould, so he had a copy, and it was done with brushes instead of rollers because he was out of most of the materials. But it is the shape, and it has some minor niggles that we will need to fix. However, it is much better than starting from scratch, and I am very excited to not have to do a full front clam. I don't mind fixing some fiberglass. The rear end, though, we're doing from scratch. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do that, but we're doing it from scratch. The wing, we might just totally do DIY. I might get some profiles of wings that should work. Maybe a bit of light CFD, I don't know, we'll see. I haven't thought that far ahead, which I really should have because I'm hoping to do this in like 2 months. Other than that, to fit these wheels and also to get bigger brakes, we're getting rid of my alloy uprights, which makes me sad because they weigh nothing. These are off of a VX220, a Vauxhall sports car that Lotus made. As you can see, these are 5 stud. 5 stud means that I can fit, or I can adapt to fit, BMW pattern wheels. Such as that. Now that there is my rear hub. Oh, that would have been bad if it fell. This here is my front hub. As you can see, they're looking very nice and repainted. They didn't come to me that way, but it didn't take a lot of effort. And honestly, if you're putting suspension parts on, it's worth tidying them up. Other than that, the other thing I mentioned is brakes. And I don't know if you can see it behind all the other stuff, but these are my new discs. Now these are 304mm AP discs from a current generation touring car. Usually after the races, the mechanics just sort of sell off a lot of the spare parts. These have done one race and have lost 0.1, if I remember right. either 0.1 or 0.15 of their nominal thickness, which means they've got plenty of life left in them. Also, check the bells out. Now, I'll talk you through how I made these in a little bit, but this is all custom made by me. I didn't do the machining, but I designed the whole thing, and they turned out pretty nice. I even did the anodizing. It's one of those things you can get distracted by just flashing about in the light, because they do look quite good. I'm not quite over the fact that they turned out quite well yet, and they're a 2 kilo saving over the standard VX220 discs, despite being much bigger. So that should hopefully offset a little bit of the weight I gain in everything else. Speaking of things that are a bit lighter and brakes, here are my new front calipers. These are brand new and unused. Well, they were brand new about 10 years ago, but they've been unused. They're 4-pot calipers, they've got 34mm pistons, which is a little smaller than the 38mm pistons on the racing 4-pots, but these are still a big upgrade over the normal 2-pots. Does mean I'm going to have to modify my master cylinder a little, but that's fine. Thing is though, with great stopping power at the front, comes the need for a bit of balance at the back. So normally you'd put the standard front brakes, AP 2-pots, onto the back, and then just leave your old brake caliper on there as a handbrake. You know what that sounds like to me? Weight. And slightly hypocritically, with all of the heavy stuff in front of me, we're trying to avoid that. So instead, we have these. These are 2-pot calipers that were made for going onto the back of various Lotuses, and they're a little bit smaller than the standard front 2-pots. They were designed actually to work with the standard front 2-pots, so the pistons are a little smaller to keep the balance right, and they have a handbrake built in. The other upside of this is this caliper weighs 1/4 of what the standard rear brake caliper weighs. This thing weighs nothing. Like, you could play catch with this. You'd cry when it hit the ground, but you could play catch with this. And that means that the back end should actually end up much lighter than it was going to, which makes me feel slightly better about the heavy uprights and the heavy wheels going on there. So that's pretty much everything we need to sort out for now. I don't have any of the bodywork to show you because it's not stored in the garage, and I don't really have anywhere to put it around me just to show it off. But it's about time we got started. I haven't been doing nothing in this time I've been waiting. I've been getting my uprights ready and I've been sorting out my desk, so I'll show you a little bit of that. And then we're into the actual project, which I'm very excited for. I've been waiting months to start this. So I'm going to stop talking, and if anyone is still awake out there, let's make this car a bit wider.
Step 1 is to remove all of our old suspension components. First off, I'm going to remove the front and rear brake calipers, followed by the discs so that we can expose the upright itself. Now we want to get rid of the toe link and the track rod end so that we can move the uprights about to access the bolts that hold the ball joints up. Some of these are fairly easy to get into and go straight into the upright, others however are held on by steel plinths and they're a bit more of a faff. The plinths are also going to want to stay on the ball joint on the wishbone, and a wee bit of upward pressure and a sharp shock with a hammer should pop those straight off. I'm also going to pull the drive shafts out because they're not going to match up to our new hubs, and while we're here, I think the steering rack can go as well, because we're going to be replacing that with one with a quicker ratio. Now that all of that's out of the way, those front wishbones are looking a little rusty, so if we get rid of the shocks off the front, we can also go through all of the bolts for the wishbones, which are in varying and increasingly more awkward locations as you go on, and then we can pull those straight out as well.
Now we want to give everything a good clean up with a wire wheel. Try not to swallow too much of this stuff, it really isn't good for you. Then a few coats of your favourite metal paint should see these wishbones looking as good as new. Those old ball joints however need to go, so we're over to the hydraulic press to pop those out. These haven't been out in a very long time, at least in the time I've known them, so it takes a wee bit of pressure, but eventually. And now after a good route through the freezer, I'm sure I left, there they are, there's the ball joints. And a little bit of surface cleaning, our new ball joints can be pressed into place. A little easier than getting them out. Remember to make sure to check that they're properly seated through the inspection hole on every wishbone. The uprights themselves are going into an electrolysis bath. This stuff is not the nicest, so try not to drink too much of it. Tasty stuff. Once our uprights are done souping, we can lift them out and leave the rust behind in the tank. However, we do now need to give them a good scrub to get rid of all the nastiness. And then we're on to the same paint we used for the wishbones. Well, it's about time we put this car back together. Going to start off at the front because we've got those nice new wishbones to go in. And the front wishbone's always fairly easy, it's just 2 bolts, but you do need to remember your caster washers. I like to put mine at the front because that's just the setup that I prefer. The lower wishbone is pretty straightforward too, you've just got a little bit of sprackling about inside the cabin to get those bolts in. And with that done, we're on to our nice shiny new hub, which is coming together with our nice shiny new ball joints. We can then tighten up the upper and the lower ball joints using an Allen key to stop them from turning as we do the nut. And then we can fire the shock in, because we wouldn't get a very nice ride without that now, would we? Moving on to the rear, I haven't done the wishbones here because I done them last time the car was apart, so we're just giving the shock a nice clean, which actually came up pretty good. And then we can fire on our brand new hub. So here we're gonna mock things up, I reckon. We're gonna pop on one of the old Vauxhall VX220 brake discs and our wheel adapter. The wheel adapter takes the stud pattern from 4x114 as it would be on a Vauxhall to 5x120 as you'd find on a BMW, and our brand new wheels. With that done, we can test fit our rear wheel to get an idea of how this is going to look. Now, the wheel nuts I have for this are a little too short, so the wheel's going to wobble a little bit if we spin it, but that's fine, we're just getting an idea of how it's going to look. Okay, that's a pretty big wheel right there. If we were into Corvettes, we would be calling this thing a steamroller. Now, with that done, we can move on to our nice new front brake. Oh, whoa, getting ahead of ourselves there. I'm afraid this video's actually ran on a bit longer than I expected it to, and therefore, before we get started on a whole new subject, I'm going to cut off here. So you're going to have to come back next time to see the brand new brake setup and some of the really interesting stuff that we've got in store.